I think we are seeing that the voice of the people is becoming stronger.
We're making progress, but there's still a lot to go to grab a generation who's so passionate about justice.
I think the desire for truth, the desire for authenticity is what we as Christians can bring to bring the gospel into the world in a bigger way, because people are seeking it and people are wanting it. Welcome back, everyone, to the On Water podcast. I am your host, Jin Choi. What happens with your relationship with God on your own in that vertical before the horizontal? Yeah. I was so excited for this new generation that's coming up that's like so on fire for Christ. I want this to be an outlet for people to feel encouraged and to know that God can do so much more with your obedience than you can possibly believe. Welcome back, everyone, to the On Water podcast. Today, I'm just going to do a short introduction for the actual episode today. I was invited by the ACP, the CCCA, which is the Associated Church Press, and the Canadian Christian Communications Association. I know, a lot of alliteration. But I was invited by them to join them for a workshop that they were doing for their conference called Reaching Across Divides. And they are basically a communications and a press, a print media, two different organizations that kind of wanted to have discussions about how we can reach the people, you know. And the workshop that I participated in was actually called Intergenerational Communication. And it was me alongside two other people, Chris Vascher and Kayla. So Chris is a founder, lead consultant of ClearWay Church Solutions. Sorry, I had to read that. I can't even read my own writing. But ClearWay Church Solutions basically helps church leaders and different Christian organizations go from vision to strategy and kind of help them with whatever leadership consultation that they need. And Kayla is the Canadian director of How to Life Movement, which is a for Gen Z, made by Gen Z organization that helps the younger generation, help them and support them in creating tools so that they can be evangelistic, create missional communities, create events where the gospel is spoken. And so we actually had three different representatives. Like, I'm Millennial, Gen Z, Kayla was Gen Z, Chris is Gen X, and we're all coming from very different perspectives on how to speak and communicate to multiple generations, and also media. We're doing media communication. I'm communicating to you right now, and we talked about how, like, the existence of print media and how it can not survive, and how the older generation needs to talk to the younger generation so that there is discipling, there's mentoring, and how we can evolve and change and move throughout our multiple generations in a very fruitful way. And so we had some really good conversation. Kayla and Chris are both very, very skilled and talented and intelligent in their fields. And just being able to sit with people and talk about the ins and outs, the hurdles and the difficulties, but also how to do it right, how to create a system that works together throughout generations. And I think we don't have that conversation more than we should. So hopefully this workshop speaks to you, informs you, inspires you to have more of these conversations, and maybe even affirms you in some of the struggles that you've been having, either as a young person talking to the older generation, or someone in the older generation trying to reach and trying to talk and trying to connect with the younger generation in whatever form of media that you're trying to do. And so I'll shut up now. Enjoy. Thank you, everyone, for coming to the workshop for intergenerational communications. Obviously, we still need to kind of introduce ourselves. My name is Jen. I run a podcast called On Water Podcast. It is a faith-based podcast that is focused on helping people grow in depth in their relationship with God. So people who feel like everything's kind of one-dimensional in their relationship with the Lord, kind of help them grow in their depth and start up conversations in that way. And I've been kind of doing that for 3 years. And my main focus is usually to reach youth and young adults. But that's kind of what I'm doing in my ministry. But I'm also a psychotherapist by trade. And so that's kind of how I connect with people generally, is starting off conversations by talking to them human to human, right? And so that's kind of where I'm coming from. And we have Kayla and Chris, and they can go ahead and introduce themselves.
Yeah, hi guys. I'm Kayla, and I am the National Director for a movement called How to Life. We equip students to reach their friends who through outreach events, consisting of testimonies, worship, and a gospel message. But the power of it is completely done by students for students. So they listen to their friends more than anybody else. Why not have, instead of that being like this big scary thing, why not use it for the sake of the gospel? So I came in as a student at 14. I'm like, wait, they're my age and they're doing something? I want to do that. And now at 22, I get to lead the movement. So yeah.
My name is Chris Vascher. It's great to be here. I run ClearWay. It's a consulting company. We work primarily with churches, Christian nonprofits, and ministries around vision, strategy, and execution. We do lots with team development, and so from an intergenerational perspective, helping older leaders and younger leaders get on mission together and go in the same direction. So really excited to be here.
Awesome. Okay, so that's a little bit about us. And just, again, me, I like to know who's in the room, and we kind of got a few voices earlier. But who is a boomer in the boomer generation? Anyone? No?
Yeah.
Do you know the years, Chris?
Yeah, boomers generally are born post-World War II. Everyone comes back from the war. They're real happy to see each other, and so lots of babies show up. Gen X generally starts kind of late 60s through to early 80s. Millennials then come of age at the turning of the millennium. And then Gen Z are, I was going to say children. Gen Z are not children. They're born kind of, if you don't remember 9/11, that's a bit of the generational marker. That's the marker for Gen Z. And now we're seeing Gen Alpha, kind of born 2010 up till now. So those are the rough markers that we use for generational.
So we don't have boomers, but do we have Gen X? Okay, so quite a number of you. And then millennial. Okay, so majority of us are millennial. And then Gen Z. 1, 2, 3. Yes, Gen Z in the room. Okay. All right, so now we can see a majority of us are leaning more towards the millennial and Gen X demographic, which is actually going to show a lot about our conversation today and kind of what we are focusing on. And I think we can start off really just talking about why this topic is even important, especially How to Life movement, even when you're consulting with different churches, why this conversation, why the topic of intergenerational communication is important for all of us. I don't know if you guys have thoughts on that.
Yeah, I can kick it off. I think one of the things that I've been learning in the past a little bit is how we truly do need each other. Like there's this, especially with what's happening within Gen Z right now, there's especially like, let them run. And yes, because I think there has been like, in the past, it's been like, there's been so many barriers, but I also think like how we want to be supported. So like Gen Z, oftentimes it's like, okay, we're going to do our own thing because there's not space for us. And so I think in this intergenerational communication space, I'm really excited to kind of explore, okay, what does it look like to do this together and not just, okay, Gen Z saying we don't feel valued, so we're going to go our own way, or the church saying, oh, they don't want us, so we're going to go our own way, but actually like listening to one another.
Right.
Yeah, one of the really interesting things in any group of people, so whether it's church, ministry, company, really any audience, we've kind of always had 3 generations working together. So we've had sort of the mentor generation, and then we've had the worker generation that gets it done, and then we have the entry-level generation that comes in and is just like, happy to sweep the floor and then get an opportunity to move up. And now for the first time in human history, because people are working longer and staying healthier longer, we have 4 generations working together, and as Gen Alpha comes up, we're going to have 5. We've never done this before, and what we see is, without boomers being in the room, boomers who are hanging around longer Gen X, kindly, gently waiting for our turn to get the corner office. It's not quite coming yet. And millennials and Gen Zs, particularly Gen Z, who don't really think of organizational structure or like community dynamics in the same way. So the idea of coming in entry level and working your way up the org chart doesn't really fly for Gen Z. So we have a lot of internal strain that comes from these misunderstandings and in some ways unmet expectations. So when we're thinking about communication outwardly to a community or inwardly inside of an organization, we have to think about how communication is being transmitted, but also how it's being received, because those two things are often not the same when we're thinking about different generations together.
Right. And it's not just in topic or the way that you communicate, but it's also the medium in which we communicate, that it changes over the course of those 5 generations. And I think like being able to work together is dependent on that. Right, to be able to know how one is receiving and one is giving information and even building connection with one another. And I kind of wanted to speak on what Kayla brought up, because what's great is Gen X, Gen Z, Millennial. So we have 3 different generations being represented just in this conversation. And I think as a cusper, so I'm like... People are like, you're a millennial. But I like to say I'm a cusper. I'm cusping the Gen Z and millennial kind of line. And I think Gen Z is the first generation where they all grew up with internet. And so they're all kind of growing up with this, a lot of information. And even though they have a lot of information, I always like to say whenever we're talking to an audience, they either want information or they want inspiration or they want both. And it's what do they need and what do they want? And I think right now, the younger generation has a lot of information, a plethora of information. They grew up with Google, like we grew up with Google. And so there's a lot of ways where we can get as much information as we want. But that's the thing. Are we being inspired? Are we being mentored? Are we being discipled? Are we being walked with through that information on how to use it, how to grow in it, how to apply it into our lives? We don't really have that. And I think it starts with one thing that I've noticed is a big difference in the way that, again, receiving and giving information between the younger generations, Gen Z, Gen Alpha, Millennials, and Boomer and Gen Z, is that there is a trust factor that is needed. There is a lot of trust that is demanded and wanted by the younger generation of like, if I don't trust you, I'm not gonna trust anything that you give me. So even if you tell me something about the world or about myself or about my community, will I be able to trust you? Even I see it in churches too, where there's younger people who are like, yeah, I don't know my senior pastor like that. Like he doesn't know me like that. So how is he going to tell me how to live my life? And so receiving teaching also becomes different. And so that's just a huge difference that I see that becomes like an interference when it comes to communication is that trust. And also I'm coming from a psychotherapist perspective as well. And so like that trust and that connection and that discipleship part of communication, I think is a huge difference. And I wanted to bring that up to you guys too. Like, what is the biggest, I guess, strain or difference in that communication that you see between the generations?
I think if you think about Gen Z, go back to what I said, born post 9/11, right? So they're growing up in a world where the idea of globalism is kind of undone. Then there's the financial crash of 2008. Housing market kind of impossible to get into, government scandals, family roles falling apart, the idea of you graduate high school, you go to university, you get a degree, you get a job, you get married, you get a house, that's gone away. And so really everything institutional for Gen Z isn't true. And so when you think about what does that do to trust, what we see with Gen Z, and I'd love to hear Kayla talk about this, is the idea of having one career for life or even trusting an institutional voice goes away. It's the first generation, as far as we know in the history of the world, where family is not their number one core value. Their number one core value is stability, which I think is a huge opportunity for the church, for Christian communicators, because we have something to say about stability and we create communities of stability. And that's what they're looking for. So Gen Z often they have portfolio work, they have side hustles all the time. My own kids, one of whom is in the room, they're very open to like starting their own thing and creating their own income because the idea of relying on institutional stability has gone away. Mm-hmm. And I think then from a communication perspective, that has an impact. That's true as well.
Yeah, I agree. I think like it's been interesting, especially like I think during the pandemic, there was this huge like, I don't know how to describe it, but it was like, so for context, I graduated 2021. So like me and a lot of my friends were seeing so much like all at once. There was the protests, there was government stuff happening in the States. There was like all this different, so much going on. Yeah. And it's like, oh, I don't know what to do with a lot of this stuff. And then with it, I think that's kind of built in a lot of this mistrust of institution and like, okay, I don't know what to do with a lot of this institutional stuff, so I'm just going to go do my own thing. Mm-hmm. And so it's been interesting to kind of take a look at, okay, so I see a lot of my friends who aren't Christian saying, oh, the church is mixed up with all of this stuff and I don't really want to get tangled into this stuff because of the institutional mistrust. So yeah, I'm not really sure what to do with that, but that's kind of some of what I've seen.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I think it's underestimated how much even the pandemic and growing up with the pandemic has affected our younger generation. Because I'll tell you a story. This one time, it was actually a couple months ago, where I have a 16-year-old client, and she just broke down in one of our sessions just because she saw that on the news that there was another virus breaking out in Canada. And she was like, I can't do it again. I can't. And she's in 11th grade. And she's like, my life is ruined. Like, I have to go through this again. And she graduated 8th grade with coronavirus, right? And so she's breaking down. And then she's also like, and oh my gosh, the economy is going to go down and I'm not going to get a job and all these anxieties and preliminary worries coming from a 16-year-old, right? And trust me, even though like I grew up in the early 2000s and the 2010s, I was playing outside on my bike. I was not worrying about the state of our economic status in Canada, and that was not in the forefront of my mind. Yeah. You know what I mean? And so there's a greater distress and emphasis put on these younger generations to get it. Yeah, you have to know exactly what kind of job you're going to have. You have to learn stability, and you can't trust your parents because they're also struggling. And you have no idea how many younger people that I know who are. I actually also serve on the youth ministry at my church, and so many of them, and I have the grade 12 girls, and so they're all graduating, and they're all super worried that the decision they make today is going to be the life and death of their families of the future. And like it's a dire thing, and even if their parents are loving and caring and they want to be there for them, it's just the world that's telling them, and it's a scary place, and it's a place that's not stable. That's not reliable unless you hold your ground and know exactly what you're doing with your life. Mm-hmm. And I think that is, and that's what's the scary thing, for the younger generation, is that there is this emphasis on you knowing what's going to keep you stable over the course of your lifetime and not having trusted older people to actually help you and guide you. And I am actually a part of Wild Gen Lausanne movement, Wild Gen 4, which is basically the young leaders generation that Lausanne movement is mentoring and discipling all the way into the next 10 years. And I'm so grateful for that. And I'm right now turning 30 years old this year, just now encountering people who are older than me in their 40s and their 50s who actually care about what I have to say. And I'm like, oh, shoot, like, you guys want to know about my podcast? You guys want to, encourage me and invest in me? And you guys are saying that for the next 10 years, you're going to really work with me into helping build my ministry, but also help me carry out the vision that God has given me. Like, that's insane. Like, that blows my mind. When that is a biblical mandate, right? When that is a biblical mandate for us to be able to help mentor and disciple and kind of grow this next generation. And that's exactly what the Lord has put on us to, to be disciplers of the younger people. And so like, this is kind of what I am seeing when it comes to the mistrust, but also the heaviness that comes with the new generation. And so, now we've talked about all kind of the scary and terrible distances and the separation. And I kind of want to hear from, we'll all talk about it, but, how do we take this difference, and especially Chris, with you, like working with churches big and small, how that gap can grow closer and closer?
Yeah, where I've seen it work is when there's a shift in posture from older generation towards serving the younger generation, which seems like obvious. Oh yeah, isn't that what we have to do? Because somebody did that for us, right? At some point, somebody came alongside us and said, oh, I see something in you that you may not see in yourself, and I want to help you grow. But boomers and Gen X, sort of as we have gotten to places in our organizations that feel a little bit more comfortable than when we were coming up. We like the idea of being comfortable and having a little bit more power and a bit more authority. And so thinking about how do we shift our posture to come alongside millennials and Gen Z and soon Gen Alpha. So one framework that I use is for boomers and Gen X, kind of who were brought up in a 20th century leadership culture. And if we're thinking about communication, this does impact kind of how we're communicating, again, internally in an organization, outwardly to communities. But the leadership culture 20th century leaders grew up in was around being visionary, being directive, and being results driven. So at the end of the day, my job as a leader, my job leading a team, or even my job kind of holding an authoritative presence and communicating out to people is I have to cast vision, I have to tell people what to do, and at the end of the day, we have to produce. Where for 21st century leaders, millennials, Gen Zs, now Gen Alpha, their understanding of leadership is I need a coach, I need relationships, and I care much more about outcomes than results. So when we're thinking about as older leaders, it's good to be visionary, and we need to have kind of a sense for the future where this is going, and we need to shift our posture, come alongside younger leaders, and coach them in understanding how what they're doing is contributing to the bigger picture in the future. And shifting that directiveness, we have permission to be directive when young leaders feel like, oh, you're for me as a person, not just me as a performer. This is tricky, particularly for boomers. The idea of having a relationship with people that you work with or people in your community with is like, that's a bit of a red line, because for them, it was a red line. Nobody was in relationship with them when they were coming up. But investing in relationship, actually, I care about you as a person. I want you to succeed as a person. And when I've got relational credibility, now I can be directive because the trust is there. And then thinking through outcomes rather than results. So 20th century leaders, it's like, it's get the job done, we have to produce, and that's particularly around process. We have a way of doing things, and we know that the way works, and so just please follow the way, and we'll get the results that we need. Millennials and Gen Z, 21st century leaders, tend to think about outcomes. I know where we want to get. I'd like to own the process much more, and I'd like to be empowered and resourced with money and the ability to make decisions, but also I want to think more than just the result. I want to think about all of the outcomes. What are the impacts on the people? What are the impacts on the environment? What are the greater financial impacts? There's much more than just did we get the thing produced. And younger leaders tend to care about that much more. So as older leaders, once we get the framework and understand, oh, okay, it's not that we shouldn't be visionary, but we got to coach as well. Some can't be directive. We have to be in a relationship. It's not that we can't care about results. Think outcomes as well. And then shifting our posture to serve younger generations, which is how it has always happened. It's just trickier now. But once we get the framework, then it's easier to do.
But have you come across friction and like how to deal with that friction?
Never. Everyone's thrilled to hear this. They're like, oh, you gave me a simple little tool. I totally know.
Because the change is hard. It's difficult, right? Especially to kind of change the whole perspective and the narrative of how to organize, like churches, but also different organizations. Like changing the entire structure and mindset is tough. And so like, how do you kind of get them on board?
And it's not necessarily about changing structure, it's about rethinking structure. So I referred to org charts before, right? Boomers and Gen X, we think of, when I say org structure, you think of a pyramid. And we got in at the entry level, and we hoped by proving ourselves, we'd be able to like go up one rung, and then maybe one day we'd have an office, and maybe one day we'd be at the top. Millennials and Gen Zs take that idea of a pyramid and just lay it flat on the table. And when Gen Z comes onto a team, I'm an entry-level associate, part-time, whatever, and you're the CEO. Cool, we're both on the same team, so we both have a vote.
Right.
And the perspective of hierarchy and authority and power isn't there in quite the same way. Yeah. But to think of an org structure, instead of being top-down, being mission-forward. Yeah. So the role of the CEO, the executive director, the senior pastor, whatever it is, I'm leading the charge, and we are all moving together. But shifting my perspective, like, just because I say this is what we're doing doesn't carry the same amount of weight. How am I going to rally the team to where we're going? Going back to tension, where this really comes through is for Gen X's in the room. Because in a 3-generation model, Gen X, it would be our time to see the boomers heading off to pasture and we get the keys to the place. And that's not happening. That Gen X is getting passed over to millennials or really talented Gen Z. And we have to figure out how to navigate that internally on the inside. And that's where some more attention comes.
Right. Yeah. Why do you think the keys aren't being passed off, though?
Oh, there's so much.
I don't know. I'm just very curious.
Well, partly because boomers are hanging around longer.
Okay.
They're healthier. They're working longer. They like the paycheck. They like the ease. They like the power. Yeah. And millennials, we used to think them as like they hang out at the beach and they're catching butterflies and just kind of watching life go by. And really what we've seen is millennials have subdivided into 2 generations, Millennial A and Millennial B. There are some of those, but Millennial Bs are actually really hardworking and they actually want to make a real difference. But as Gen Z is coming out, Gen Z has this mission drivenness. They want to be part of changing the world. Here's Kayla. But they don't have that workaholism kind of limitless, I'm going to ignore
boundaries,
everything else. So boomers are actually really inspired by Gen Z. And in some organizations, we're seeing this happen where like 20-somethings are in really healthy organizations are getting way more opportunity than we've seen similar generations before. I think, Kayla and some of the people that she's running with are really great examples of that.
Yeah. No, it's been really interesting how you mentioned like the org chart flattening. Because like I lead, like everybody on my staff team is under 25. And so it's funny when other leaders come into our context and they're like, what's going on? Because we all have our role because it's like this mission driven, like you were talking about earlier, the inspiration and information, how the two work together. It's very much like, okay, we all know where we want to go together. So it's like, oh yeah, Kayla's in charge. Kayla's director. I'm not quotes. I don't know. But we operate as, hey, we're all in this together. What piece am I owning to get to this? And like, so yeah, it's been cool to watch, to see. It's funny because like going into other pieces and I forget, not realizing that is not the norm, has been like really, really interesting for me. Yeah, I could not agree more in that. Like, hey, like how can we, like, I don't know if how can we is the way to phrase it, but more so it's been like, I think I really resonate with we want to go and we're ready. And then just being able to be given more opportunities than before has been really like, I don't know. It's just interesting because like, oh, that's the reality that I'm living in. So hearing stats to back that up and like research to back that up is really is really neat. Cause I'm like, oh wait, like I just, yeah.
I mean, Kayla, how is it for you kind of managing a team of just Gen Z though? Because let's be honest, there are some productivity and some like you actually need to get stuff done. Yes. Like the things that Gen Z boomers kind of bring into the picture of like, okay, we actually need to produce something.
Yes.
Like how do you balance that with the tension of like, hey, but like we also need to take care of the people.
Yes, 100%. I think one of the greatest gifts has been we've just gotten an advisory board in the past little bit. And so, because it's like fun, young energy, let's go. Until it's like, oh, deadlines, Q4, what is this? I don't know. Mystery to me. And so having this accountability where it's not, hey, here's the results that you need to produce, but hey, we're coming alongside you. What is the vision that you feel like God's put on your heart, and how can we help you form that together? I think that has been such a gift to us because, like you're saying, Gen Z is like we're very boundaries oriented, very much because like we've seen burnout, and we're like, okay, we don't want that. And so I think it's been cool to have that like covering of sorts where it's not, hey, here's what you need to do to do to do what we think you should do, but hey, like we had an advisory meeting the other day, and it was like, hey, what is the stuff that God's put on your guys' heart? Like we could suggest things for you guys, but what are the things that you guys feel called to, and how can we come alongside that instead of the other way around where it's like, oh, like this is what you guys need to do to be successful, but like no, this as we realize that you're carrying something different. How can we come alongside that, and then how can we make sure that you guys aren't burning yourselves out, and making sure that we, like, for example, making sure we have our rest rhythms and our work rhythms, and like our Gen Z is very big into like John Mark Comer practicing the way.
Oh, he's the best. We love him.
And so it's like, it's neat to see that, but then also have the covering saying, okay, we've gone before. Yeah. These are some things that we've noticed. Let's help you shape that instead of let's take it over, because then it can easily become inauthentic. Right. But when somebody in the room was saying, like, they asked the older people what the younger people wanted, and the young people were like, yeah, no, we don't want that. Like having it all at the table together when we can have conversations like these and say, hey, actually, this is what we're thinking, and the next generation say, oh, actually, this is what we're thinking, we can work together, versus like doing things in our silos gets us a lot further than we found, because it's been like a big year for us within our ministry, and getting to have people come alongside and say, hey, we're going to help you go even further, instead of, hey, this is what you're doing great, let's change everything up to make it look like this other thing, has been such a gift to us.
100%. And I think the fact that, like we were talking about, Gen Z actually getting their voices heard, and the thought process that needs to change from the older generation, that they need to actually be there to support the younger generation, seems like it kind of fits in like a glove, right? Where they want to be heard and they want to go, and then there's that support and exactly what they need. Yeah. And you're saying that, like, having that support of it not being like a, hey, like master and servant, but like a collaborative, even with the older generation, having a collaborative relationship has been a supportive thing for you. And I think one thing that you mentioned that we were discussing about what we could talk about on in the workshop today was, how do we get the Gen Z voice heard? Like, in what ways would that actually be, like, bringing these ideas to the ground? Like, how would you see you and the people that you work with, the Gen Z, like early millennials that you are working with, how can their voices be heard and be supported in the best way possible?
I think a big piece is not having the conversation in silos. Right. Because I think sometimes I'll come into space and it's like, all right, now the Gen Z is here. Hello. But having the conversation where we're all at the table and deciding together, like, where it's not just, oh yeah, now we have the Gen Z in the room, but we're like, Chris was saying, we want to be seen in this equal, like the org chart of like, okay, top-down structure doesn't quite process for us. And so if it's a table where it's not just, okay, we're heard, but our voice is just as valued as everybody else at the table. I think that is a big piece between Gen Z and millennials, because of that tension of like, oh, we don't really understand it's been funny starting out in ministry and being like, I know how you guys do it, but I'm hearing all these things and I'm like, I can't wrap my head around that, because that's not how so many of my peers are doing it. So I think that one is a big piece. I think, like, there's this joke amongst Gen Z is like, where it's like, the millennials, what do we do with them? And so I think we could also do a better job at like reaching out and being like, oh, that's like not, we do need each other and we can't operate in silos. But I think a lot of the time is I get pulled in because of my connection to other leaders. And it's like a lot of there's people yet you guys don't know yet. And so pulling them into these conversations and like, hey, your voice is just as valued as the other people in the room. What do you have to say? I think bridges the divide between this is what I'm hearing from this side and this is what I'm hearing. Is like when you split a kid off and they're having they got in trouble. It's like, I'm hearing this side of the argument, I'm hearing this side of the argument, and you're getting two different stories. Like, what would happen if we sat down together and talked together about what we think the generation needs?
I actually agree a lot with that. Because again, me being a millennial, I was born in 96. And so I kind of I can relate to both sides. And the one thing that I've noticed with the intergenerational gap is that I think the biggest issue is there's lack of respect on both sides, right? Where there's a younger generation who is like, oh, they just don't understand. Yeah. Like they don't get it. And we're just going to do our own thing because they're obviously not going to get it and they're not going to get us. And so we're going to figure things out on our own, which kind of also feeds into the anxiety of having to do everything on their own. But, and then there's the older generation who is like, oh, they don't get it. The younger kids don't get it. They don't know really how to do things. They're still learning. They're still kids. They're still, and underestimating them. And then there's that mutual disrespect that's causing dissonance, right? And I think even when we look at media, I think the first question was the newspaper, media versus digital media and how that has been kind of clashing together. I think I'm going to be so real. I don't know the answer to that question. But what I can say is that the expectation that one is better than the other. And again, kind of what Kayla was saying, there's a lack of unity because there is a disrespect for each other's perspectives and the beauty that comes from both perspectives. But if we come and we actually work together, kind of like that baseball and that baseball glove mentality that I was bringing forward, it just works perfectly because it was designed by God for that to happen. And so that's why it works. But thing is, because of separation, because of pride, because of wanting to stay in our own silos and kind of figure things out in a dichotomy rather than in unity, I think that's what causes the tension that we're seeing a lot of the time. And so even when it comes to if we're talking about media and communication when it comes from us and the outside. I don't know if you guys have had experience of issues with, or even I know a lot of churches are struggling with the whole, my church, sorry to call my church out, but they're also struggling with the social media aspect and kind of connecting with a lot of the people who are coming into churches are now young families and young people, and they're trying to reach a demographic, but there's a lot of churches, there's a lot of organizations that are kind of stuck in the ways that they've been doing things. And so even kind of that gap of how to communicate with, I think rather than in the organization, we've been talking about a lot in an organization, but to the outside world of how even as Christians, we can do that in a more unified way. I don't know if you guys have thoughts on that.
Kind of bouncing around this idea of authority and expertise has been a theme in our conversation. And a part of communication, Joanne, I'm kind of leaning towards you in this conversation because I bet you'd have a ton to add on this. But the idea historically has been when something is communicated, there's some expertise behind it. So for Gen X and Boomers, it was if it's in black and white, it's true. And then it's the camera never lies. And if we got it on video, well, that, the concept of that has gone away now. And I'm sure you're all thinking about AI and what that means and expertise. But what we know from Gen Z and Gen Alpha is they want to be less involved with AI than other generations. They have less of a desire, but they give a higher level of expertise to AI. So I'm not sure exactly where that lands, but even the conversation around social media, I mean, we kind of joke about Facebook being, for grandparents. Instagram is kind of there at this point. Instagram has kind of evolved so far away that the move was well, just get your church on Instagram, get your company on your organization on Instagram, and that's how you're going to reach people. Instagram has now become a media company, and they're pushing creators and video content, and most churches, Christian organizations, publications can't do that. And even what social media platforms are, and I think Instagram is a great case study because I don't think they even know what they are. anymore. But then how do we lean into communicating with expertise and a level of authority that actually builds trust, breaks down walls, communicates some level of authority, but also then invites people into a conversation. I think churches have tried to do this with live streaming. We've tried to do this with website, but those metaphors and analogies, I think also, it's just changing. They're kind of going away. So I'm not sure what the answer is. Yeah. I mean, Kayla, you've got probably a really good perspective on it, but I think there's something there about expertise and authority and how it relates to different communication platforms.
Yeah. Remind me of the question again. Sorry, I was trying to
figure out what's going on. Well, like, I guess it's surrounding the medium of communication, because I think there is a desire to kind of push for like traditional media, but then majority of Gen Z and the younger generation is focused on social media and like how to, if there is even a collaboration of the two, or whether we just have to move on.
Yeah. I think like one of the things, a movement I've seen do this really well is called Circuit Riders. They're over in the States, and they have this like team of media missionaries. And one of the things that is really cool about them is in the way that they have their print stuff, they have their digital stuff, but they're not just communicating, hey, this is the stuff going on, but as, hey, this is the story. We're storytellers. This is what's happening. This is the story of what's been happening. I think with Gen Z especially, it's like not just, okay, this is truth, but they want to know what's good. And so being able to communicate that, whether it's through print, whether it's through media, I think when it's not just like, hey, because like we are in an age where every news is almost oversaturated. And it's like, I remember like in high school going to our counselor and being like, there's just so much happening and I don't know how to process all of this. But being able to break through with this is what's good and beautiful in the world. Regardless of whether that's through Instagram or through print or in different mediums. Like I was at an event the other day and they were giving away newspapers. Like, when isn't this novelty? It's like, I get a newspaper for my wall. What the heck? And getting to read through the stories of what God's been doing. Like, it's not that it's like gone. It's just, okay, how can we do this in a way that inspires? Right. How can we tell stories and not just display information? I think has been a huge one or a huge thing that I've been seeing.
Yeah. Inspiration versus just showing information on a page. I think including the idea of AI and all that stuff, and it's a scary thing, but we'll figure it out as general human beings. And I think that's why I see a lot including myself, and a lot of the youth that I work with, the idea of humanity is so valuable now because there are so many things created through AI, created through media, and to the point where we don't even know what's real anymore. And so the idea of things being created by a real human and the evidence and the proof that is written by a real person shows so much value. And that's why the storytelling, I think, is so permanent to the younger generation, because it's like, hey, it's not just like things that you're trying to convince me to believe, and I don't even know if it's true or not, but you can't just fake a story. Like, this is someone's life and this is humanity. And it's like, oh shoot, so if I see this person in real life, they'll tell me the exact same story that they put on their Instagram, reels, or that they put on this magazine or something like that, right? Yeah. And there has to be a connection with the information because it is something that is hitting their heart rather than their mind. And I think like I haven't honestly given a lot of thought when it comes to like print media because I haven't seen it in so long. Genuinely, I really haven't seen. And this is why when Kayla says like, oh, like I can put it up on my wall, that's a genuine thing. And that's the reality of print media right now, where it's Gen Z, Gen Alphas are like, this is a relic. And that's how far we've gone with how, I guess, how much it's actually seen on a day-to-day. And I know that there's still probably like newspaper little container thingies that you can put quarters in and get it. But like, I don't know that. Like, I haven't seen one in so long, but I do know that I saw Instagram this morning. I do know that I can see my friend's story from what she posted last night, like an hour ago. I do know that. And I think it's because the access that people have to these things are also very vastly different. And I genuinely think that the reason why it's like, oh, newspaper, it's not like that, but it's, oh, this is a relic, because again, newspaper shows humanity. It shows that someone wrote this, someone printed this, someone was a part of this. And I don't think that it is like it is a terrible thing, but it's showing us something, right? It's showing us that the focus of the younger generation is different, but also like the access to the things and the direction of the access is going to be different. And so I same thing with Chris. I don't know what the answer is, and I don't really know what direction like this the means of the medium of communication is going to go throughout the years. But what I do know now is that and I think what's great for the gospel is the focus on humanity, right? Is that we don't want information, we want inspiration, and that comes with connection, and that comes with trust. And I think that really is the focus of even the intergenerational communication within organizations, but also outside of organizations, is that there is a resurgence of desire for connection and a desire for people to be real with each other, because fake is so easy now. Yeah. And even with the rise of social media, fake is so easy. And so to bring, and that's so great, because the fact that fake is so much more, skepticism is not great. I'm not saying that, but I think the desire for truth, the desire for authenticity is, what we as Christians can bring to bring the gospel into the world in a bigger way, because people are seeking it and people are wanting it. Yeah.
Sorry. I hear you say like these values of authenticity and these values of humanity, but humanity is a complex thing. Mm-hmm. And I was thinking about the role, especially early on when you're talking about the generations and boomers not passing it on and wanting to skip some generations and kind of thinking about their legacy. And so I'm a younger Gen X, grew up in the United States, and a lot of our government is still dominated by boomers. And I'm wondering, as we're looking at a mission-driven organization with all these generations, we're looking at what humanity needs and authenticity as values. Where is the role of repentance, confession, repentance, and reconciliation? Because I know as a Gen Xer, and I had Gen Z and Gen Alpha kids, and my Gen Z kids would say, "You're a boomer," and I'm like, "Do you even know like your history? Your grandparents are boomers." But there's a lot that the boomers need to repent of. There's a lot all of us need to repent of, and we're still living in some systems and things. Mm-hmm. And I see, also having worked as a minister in pastoral care with older folks, how much they want to glaze over some things to leave their legacy. And I just wonder, and how they can do that with their grandchildren sometimes. Like, how in these organizations with all these multiple layers do we make full room for the authentic and human conversations that really include confession and repentance?
Chris?
We're recording this, right?
Yes.
Right, I gotta be real careful. That is not an easy question. Do we need to repeat the question? Because that
no.
Was that picked up on?
We'll see.
How do we have to navigate in terms of thinking about humanity and authenticity? What needs to be repented of across generations? What have we held on to? What systems are we perpetuating and propagating? I mean, I think it's a massive question, and I don't think it has a simple answer. I think if you were to come at it from a perspective of empathy, you would say, for the most part, boomers are trying to do the best they could. So they grew up in a world post-World War II that had gone through 50 years of unbelievable global conflict. And now we've come out of it. And now we have this sort of new world order where global power is centered in America, in North America, that economically things are booming. Financially, there's more resources than ever. And at the same time, some of the things that were true socially are going away. So now we have families where both parents have to work, and we have capitalism that demands us to continue producing more and more. So if you go back to that framework of being visionary, being directive, being results focused, the hallmark corporately in terms of 60s, 70s, and 80s is how much can we produce? How much can we sell? How many new markets can we open? And so we have corporate leaders who grew up in this environment where say like that's just the water they were swimming in. And I don't say that to like discount it or demean it, but it's not as simple as saying, hey, we just need now to think of the children and everyone be nicer to each other. Because there are generations of people who have grown up programmed to believe that where things are right now is victory. There is more evidence that's being demonstrated that that's not true. And who are the voices that are able to communicate that with a level of authority, with a level of empathy that actually hits home? This is being recorded. I'm going to be careful about what I say, but I believe we are seeing the tide turning a little bit. You referenced American government leaders. I will reference American government leaders. I think we are seeing that the voice of the people is becoming stronger, and the recognition that the way this has worked for the last 75 years is not good for us. Now, there's still a lot of power centered at the top to keep some of the majority of those voices quiet. But how do we make room for different voices, different perspective around the table? I mean, the point about repentance specifically, particularly from like a spiritual angle, at some point, corporately, nationally, and there are Christians who are pushing this forward to say like, yeah, we may not have everyone say, oh God, what have we done? But there certainly are voices in the church across North America saying like, oh God, what have we done? And so I can't force other people to repent of those things, but I think we need to be aware of that and make space for that conversation to happen. And me being a bit of an optimist and a real, but like I see the tide turning and the tide changing. And truthfully, then I see people like Kayla and others in Gen Z, and what can we do as older leaders to make space and to make room, not just at the table, but like I said before, giving money and giving decision-making power to like actually build things and run things and make change happen. So I think we see both the opportunity for both there. Yeah, and Greatest Generation, the marker there is they really came together globally against fascism. So their conviction was we have to make the world better for our kids. The boomer perspective is we are making the world better for ourselves. Right. And that's continuing on. So there's a lot there. I would love to hear, Kayla, your perspective on that.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think Gen Z desires authenticity across in all areas. So we can talk about I think what's been beautiful to see a lot of the times when things come out and there is repentance. I think I've watched a lot of my friends over the course of the pandemic and the deconstruction movement start to leave the faith because they were like, all of this is happening and we're just going to brush past like nothing happened. And so I think the confession and repentance is important because when you're able to say, oh, I see what's happening and I'm sorry. I see the hurt you're carrying because of this and I'm sorry. And I think, like Chris was saying, we're a lot further than we've ever been before. But then I look at what's happening in a lot of my friends are looking at secular spaces. In Canada, we have a big conversation about truth and reconciliation, for example. And they do there's still so much work to be done. But I will say a lot of the times I see them doing a lot better job than Christians when it comes to confession and repentance as to what's happened. And so people are like looking and, okay, the church isn't doing it. Everywhere else is. Let's go. Yeah. So I think we're making progress, but there's still a lot to go to grab a generation who's so passionate about justice and authenticity and things being made right. Because if we don't grab it, we could lose if we don't grab that confession and repentance piece, we could lose a generation because they're like, oh, they're like, even with what you were talking about earlier with institutional mistrust, like we could, if we don't grab the, hey, this is, and acknowledge, hey, these are some of the wrongs, we could lose some of those justice-driven younger leaders.
You talked a lot about trust. How can our publications build trust? What are some practical things that we could be doing? Sorry, I'm coming from an Xer, but
no.
Yeah.
Fair enough. 100%.
Just tell us what to do.
No, 100%. Honestly, I think the building of trust comes with connecting with people. And even if because I think majority of people who are not in the publication space just see it as like conglomerates who are just trying to convince us of some worldview, and they don't actually want to connect with us, right? And so if there is an actual desire to connect, I think that has to kind of be the underlying motivator that actually brings people in. And so that's my first thought, but we have a second question.
Yeah, so I was going to say another way that we can build trust, and I've seen this happening with larger corporations as well. Just as we were mentioning earlier, we are trying to get to see the human behind things because things are easier to fake and like you're not really sure what's real anymore. And so what I've seen online more recently is proof that things are human. So what that looks like for larger organizations is they'll show the behind the scenes of an ad that they did that used claymation, for example. And I've seen a lot of organizations lean into these, for lack of a better word, like older art forms, right? Something that takes a lot more presence and hands-on to do. And so when we're thinking about publications, something that I tried to be a little bit more intentional about is filming behind the scenes. So like that would be, okay, I'm doing the interview with this individual. Would you mind if I take like a quick video of us? Or we're setting up the photo shoot. Let me set up my camera to show the process of us setting up this photo shoot. That way people can see there are people behind this article, people that are investing their time. That's
100%. I agree with that too, where there's a lot of churches and a lot of bigger organizations that are a little bit further out from like the people on the ground, that kind of media and that kind of social media really does help support the connection that they have with the writers, whoever is a part. And I would love to see that. If I could see like how a publication works, that would be really cool.
Apple just did this with the MacBook Neo campaign, where they did a whole series because it looks CGI, but it's not. It's actually all analog. And the videos around how they made the ads got more views than the videos in the campaign of launching.
Yeah, no.
And I think that speaks to something is that, think Boomer Gen X, the idea of building expertise and authority was be polished and perfect. And now actually building expertise and authority is like be real and be a little bit raw and be willing to admit like, oh, we're not sure about this. Here's what we're exploring, or like show behind the scenes, show more of the humanity of the story in it.
And I think one thing that Kayla brought up was about the collaborative portion is to not just be like, hey, Gen Zs, you make the videos and we'll be here and we'll do the actual work, that kind of attitude. But it's like, hey, let's bring each other both in the room for those meetings. Like, okay, if we're going to make videos, okay, then you have to actually know what videos are being made and how they're being made, and everyone being a part of that. And even the publication portion, including Gen Zs into that, so that even the content is also catered to people who are actually going to read it. Because if you go on social media and do all these videos and then they go onto your publication and they're like, I don't want to read this. Like there's that too. And so having Gen Zs and having like the younger generation be in those spaces where the content is also made, I think that would actually make all of it very unified, which would be beautiful. We'll have one last question.
Yeah, to your point, to where they are there, where the content is being made, as you guys were talking, it reminded me of an event. They had a youth event a couple of months ago, and he had one of these Gen Zs who was part of our media team. And they said, there's this trend going on in terms of, what year were you born? And I didn't know anything about that. So they said, we want to do it because we had our older, youth leaders there, and we had young folks. And so I said, okay, let's try it. And let me tell you, they had so much fun, and the interaction, because we had older leaders and we asked them what year were they born. And so before they said their year, we had them, like in these, they're like Noah or, old Bible.
Jurassic Park.
Yeah.
Yes. And so we leaned into that, and I saw the social media just blew up. The kids were, the youth, the young folks were like, this is great. We see our young folks, we see our older leaders, we see our young folks who are having fun and leaning into that space. So, yes.
Awesome. Okay, well, it looks like we're out of time. You guys are going to go on your break, but why don't we have Bosco kind of close this off for us?
Sure. And I was going to say, I think so much. I love that the line. I mean, the line that fake is so easy was just decorate me. And one of the pieces, you may not know this, is from a generational theory. We have 8 generations alive right now, actually. In the workplace, in the church especially, we have older leaders. So for boomers, the oldest boomers are actually 80 years old. So if you have 8 people older than 80 in your elders board or any old thing, you have actually another generation in the workplace because they're working, right? And so and last year, any baby born last year is Gen B year. So when we're still talking about millennials, why young millennials? Please talk about Gen Alpha and Gen Beta is what we're asking them for. And I think it's a good lesson for us to learn. And I thank you so much for many of the things. And I hope we continue the conversation. It's not a one-time conversation. And intergenerational is we need to have full conversations with each other. It's because date is so easy. But it's okay to be real, right? And it's okay to be real. As fake it to make it was the old saying. And now it's like, well, actually, no. To make it in this world, you have to be not fake. So thank you so much.